Okay, so Sego Sego Guego, hello everyone, greetings, Goanago Niyong Yuts. My Wahunga name is Goanago, Bonnie Whitlow is my English name. Waxkarlewage, I'm Bear Clan, Ganyuki Hagani Wagun Kunjoda, I'm Mohawk. I'm the mother of a beautiful 12-year-old son, soon to be man, named Luana Hudyas. And yeah, that's it. I'm from Six Nations.
I'm Ellie Joseph, one of the co-founders of Touro on the Grand, and we're here to have a dialogue with Bonnie today and really appreciate your coming to speak with us. First of all, we would like to talk about allyship because we know that that's part of your work. But before we do that, I'll have Jay introduce himself as well.
I'm Jay Bailey, another co-founder of the Touro on the Grand, here as an ally. And allyship is what this is all about.
Yeah, so I guess just on allyship, I feel like that's been my life's work. It's something that I've been involved in since I don't even remember. Like I can't recall when. It's been forever. And I think actually, if I delve into that thought a little bit more, that allyship is something that we've been trying as Haudenosaunee people to teach our Canadian counterparts since contact, since the arrival of the immigrant population, the European immigrant population. So, and I think that comes from all of our basic philosophical tenets, from the Great Law to the different treaties like the Dish with One Spoon, all of the prehistory, our creation story. It's all about relationship to the earth, relationship to every single being. That's what we talk about. We dance those stories, we sing those stories. That's our cultural legacy. That's what we have to offer the world. And I think that's why so many of us, like yourselves, are compelled to do this work, and you get into it and you just never come out of it. It's your entire life's work.
I think for me, being a resident of the Six Nations Reserve, I have to look back historically to pre-contact times when, you know, our Haudenosaunee people lived in what is now New York State. And we had our way of life, our social, economic, matrilineal society was thriving and robust. And, you know, here we are in 2021, and we're still resilient, but it's a struggle. And we, under the Touro Treaty, have made a promise to each other that we would look after our own vessels and look after our own business and affairs and not interfere with each other's way of life. It's not easy anymore because we're in contact with each other all the time, and what I need to see moving forward in my lifetime is how we can do that and maintain that peace and that unity and that friendship that we promised each other and to ourselves. And I think that's what keeps the candle under me ignited, because we're getting there and there's a whole lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think a lot of people, for whatever's happening in this time, like of, I guess, planetary evolution, there seems to be a lot more people who are listening now. I don't know what the key is that has changed that. Like, I'm not sure why it's so different in this time, but I feel like, and it's giving away my age, but like in the 90s when we started doing these things, and we were like, I was a student at McMaster University, and we were going in there and we were having these conversations, and literally nobody could hear us. the ears were closed to us, the minds were closed to us. There was just, it was a completely different feeling, and so there was a lot more fight, a lot more conflict, and a lot more struggle. But something has happened in the past couple of years, and I don't know how to describe it, but I would I would agree with Romeo Shaganash and his famous line in Parliament where he just said, I think he said Trudeau, but I would have said Canada doesn't care. That's what I would have said. And I felt that, and it was like heartbreaking and infuriating and all of those things. There was like all of this like negative emotion bound up in that thought because it just seemed like we weren't getting anywhere. And then I would hear the older people talk about their struggles in like the 50s and the 60s, and I was just like, nothing has changed. But, and I would have said that probably right up until they discovered the graves and we did the 215 walk. And it was just straight down this street here, and we came up this driveway. And there was just something about that day, like I had a hard time keeping my emotions in check because so many people showed up for that, and I had never seen that before. There was like 2,000 or 3,000 people that came out to that, and before that, I would have said Canada didn't care. But after that, like, it's different. Like, Canadians do care, right? And so we're in a different time now, and they're listening, and it's been like all of these people that have gone forward before us and did all of the education and all of the awareness and talking about who we are as Ungwahumwe, who we are as Haudenosaunee, who we are as, well, in my case, Kanyankehaga. Like, we have all of these protocols and responsibilities that tell us all the time that we have to have, 7 skins thick, and we have to just maintain our peace. But it was so difficult to maintain your peace doing this work like decades ago. I felt like there was no peace, and I was always looking for it. I was always trying to find the people who knew Skana and Gasat Stasana and Gatniguhlio. I searched those people out everywhere, and I was like, I wanted to have conversations with them. I wanted to be around them, and I wanted to know how their lives allowed them to carry themselves in a way that was so kind and compassionate and peaceful. And then when I started to try to find more of those people, I was really interested in like their lifestyles and what happened in their childhoods and all of those things. And what I discovered was at some point, you just have to make that choice. So they still had all of the struggles. They still had to do with intergenerational trauma. They still had to deal with, all of the oppression and the violence of the oppression and the genocidal practices and all of the stipulations and the difficulties of reserve life and the difficulties of engaging with communities that are nearby the reserves, because they're always the most difficult spaces. It was eye-opening to me to hear their stories and say, oh, wait a minute, so you didn't always have this in your life, and at some point during your growth, you just had to make a decision to maintain that and to promote that. So I'm still learning. I still get incredibly frustrated in creating things when the negativity peeks in. I can't always maintain my skana. I try, and I think really it's just probably my age too. I've gotten to an age where I recognize that it's not all about me, it's not all about them, it's just a situation that you can choose. In every single moment, you can choose to just go, okay, I don't know what's happening with that person. They might be coming at you in a real negative way, but you don't have to engage, and you can just push it off and let them have it and not have to go into it. So I think too, what has happened is I've spent so much time writing about allyship and creating allyship documents and creating allyship toolkits and things to give out and providing people with teachings of the Guyana Legoa, teachings of the different treaties, and every single treaty that we make is all about relationship. It always talks about your relationship to each other, your relationship to the land, your relationship nation to nation. It's all in there, and it's repeated every time. And maybe it's repeated because we didn't hear it at first, right? And so they had to restate all of the things from the previous treaties. And so everyone, it's like, you have to treat each other kindly. You have to use peace and respect. And you have to use these filters in your words, right? Before you say anything, you filter it through those three things so that you can still respect the person or the nation that you're talking to, right? These are all practices that are in there, that are in our traditional teachings. And so it's really just the practice of applying those things and like being able to like step back and go, okay, I'm triggered here for some kind of reason. I don't have to engage, and reset myself and try to work from a place of peace. But also that doesn't mean, I would say that you have to accept the negative behavior, because you can draw that boundary and say, like really clearly, I'm not going to engage, I don't accept that treatment, and I'm going to do something better, and maybe you can take some time to yourself. So,
I'm just thinking, you know, as you're saying these things, Bonnie, you know, Jay and I are now focusing forward on next year, which will be our 7th Turo on the Grand, and where we're going to go forward. We recognize as Ongwehoe that we need to look forward to the next 7 generations. So it's beyond just the dialogue that we're having here. It's beyond just the dialogue that we're having because you have a 12-year-old son and he's going to inherit this. It goes way beyond that. And, you know, the Turo Wampum is over 400 years old. And, you know, we need to keep reminding ourselves, I need to keep reminding myself that I need that good mind. I need that inner dialogue on a day-to-day basis, and it's not always easy. And, you know, we've had COVID for 2 years. It sort of put aside our annual camp and paddle on the Grand River. But we're looking forward to next year, because hopefully we'll be able to do that flotilla again. And so much has happened in the past 2 years. Yes, the 215, and it's growing, you know, exponentially. And the ripple effect that's coming from that is hitting all aspects of every person in Canada in some way, shape, or form. And so, you know, we're looking now as what can we do next year? And I want to turn it over to Jay for a minute, because I think as an ally to us, Jay, you have been so powerful and instrumental in making that connection and trying to focus on the Turo Wampum and what it means as an ally. So let's hear from you and what's going on in your head today.
As an ally, I feel that my role is one of support in times like this, where I don't think I and other allies should be trying to come up with a solution. What we need to do is encourage the development of resources, the unveiling of truth, and the development of people who can engage and really, like, my skill set is not in research. My skill set is not in politics. But we need to encourage people who can, with a good mind, again, delve into these things and come to a working relationship. And so I don't feel like I've done a tremendous amount in terms of engaging other allies and that sort of thing. But certainly getting people to come to the Two-Row Underground and hear the teachings and engage with Haudenosaunee people has made a big difference to a lot of people. A much greater difference than I imagined. And that's why our 1 year, one event turned into something annual, because we said, no, this has made such a difference to people that we can't not do it again.
And I think that speaks to the importance of individual change, right? Right, and what one single individual can do. So you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're inviting people out, you're kind of role modeling that, and you're not overstepping your space. And I'm sure you've had difficulties in there where you're like, oh, I overstepped my boundary, and somebody brought you into check, and you had to kind of step back and think about that and reflect.
Yeah, I feel my role is holding space, being a catalyst sort of for this kind of engagement and raising of awareness and just connection.
Bonnie, you know that the Two-Row on the Grand was a follow-up from the Two-Row Renewal Campaign in New York State, led by Hickory Edwards.
Yeah.
And it's our understanding that you were there the day that the flotilla came into Manhattan. Can you talk to us a bit about that? Because you certainly have a different perspective than Jay and me.
Right. So it was because of relationships that I had made on other journeys that we were on, like with the Spirit of the Youth and the Wiping of the Tears and all of those things that had happened like throughout the 90s, maybe into the early part of the century. And I had made a friendship with De Gotts, who is Hickory's cousin. And when Hickory first started this, she kept saying, come out. I want you to come out to this thing, because we had been together on these other Unity runs and rides. And so I had taken time off. I had taken a couple of weeks off, and I hurt myself. I ended up on crutches, just as I am this time, and so I couldn't actually go on the paddle. And it was because I had told her twice that I was going to try and make it out, and I didn't make it out. And so I was like, I'm going to go to this one. So I ended up talking my sister into going. I think Terry Lynn Brent was there. There was just a few people that had traveled down. And it was important to me to go there and show support to the people who had organized it and say, like, this is an amazing thing. I just wanted to be a body in the crowd that was showing support. And so we got there, and everybody came in so quickly, and then we went and we had the talk. And the fun part of it was traveling with like a bunch of Haudenosaunee women who were sitting in like the backs of trucks going through downtown New York and having cops yell at us and telling us where to go. and those older women go, we're gonna do what we want. You know? It was so much fun, because it was just like we just had this attitude like, you can't tell us what to do. And we traveled all the way through Manhattan with police escort to the United Nations, went into the United Nations, and then we came back across. And then when we went back across New York, we did it the same way, right? With the same attitude, and people saying, you can't do that, you can't be here like that. And just having like Terry Lynn and Gail just saying like, we're grandmas, you know, like, you're gonna listen to us. And so they just jumped in the back of these trucks and we traveled back across Manhattan to our cars. And it was something that we had done a lot of times in different places. And so it was just like another layer, another example of all of the work that the Haudenosaunee nations had been doing since contact. It was just one more style or one more example of how that can look. And I felt like we were protected. So even when cops were yelling at us, whatever attitude those ladies had, telling them off and saying, we're gonna do what we want, we have to get back to our cars. You know, we were just like little Indians in the big city. Bringing our attitudes with us. So, and then when I heard that you were going to do the 2-row again, I wanted to say, this is really awesome. How do I help? So I helped you with the presentations and, you know, writing the stuff and just like, what can I do to support this thing, and then advertising it and bringing you into the university to talk about it so you could influence more people and perhaps attract some youth to it. And it's just, these things are really important, and people have no idea what it's like to travel like that anymore, right? So when we did the Unity runs and the Unity rides that went all the way across Canada and came back, people have no idea what it's like to travel on the road and sleep in your car and get up the next morning and circle up and travel for an entire day and then circle up and talk about the day and put things to rest and then do it again for like 30 days. I think it took us 32 days to come back from Oneida, Wisconsin, doing that kind of work. And so the same thing with traveling down the river. People have to recognize that the time is different and the experience is different, and you're on the land and you're engaging with the waters and the animals in the waters and the trees and the plants, and you're having these discussions and experiences with the people. And there's this beauty. There's a feeling, there's nothing like that feeling, especially when it's with groups of people who are committed to trying to reconcile. And I want to share, so one of the favorite things that I've heard Darren Thomas say, so I'm just enjoying my time at Laurier right now, because for the first time we have a senior AVP who follows the Guyana Letgoa and knows what it is, who knows the treaties, who knows peace and power and Scotney Gorla, like, he knows what that one mind is. And so he is transforming the place. He's only been there for like a couple of months, and he's transforming the place. And what he has said, which I love, is that reconciliation isn't about us. Reconciliation is Canada and Canadians reconciling with themselves the actual history of how Canada became Canada, and all the illegalities and all the nefarious things that occurred, the genocide, the white supremacy, all of those things are all wrapped up into reconciliation. And so it's coming to terms with that, and then once you've gotten over the tears and the fragility and all of those things, re-engaging and making things right. It's the restitution and it's the relationship building, which is why 2-row on the Grand is so important, because you have to do everything together. You have to eat together, you have to go to the bathroom together, you know, like maybe not at the same time, but you have to make stops so that people can go to the bathroom, right? Like, you have to do everything together, and you have to care for one another, and you have to have a lead, and you have to have the person behind, and you have to have the people who are flanking, making sure that everybody is okay and everybody is helping each other along the way. And it's like, oh, I forgot, I don't know, my granola. Here, have a granola bar. You know, I have extra water. Do you need a blanket? Do you need a hat? Like, it's all of those things where in a very real way you're demonstrating and role modeling all the tenets of the Guyana Legoa and the 2-row and the dish with 1 spoon and all of those things. It's all practical applications, and you don't know what it looks like until you're required to do it.
And you know, I've spoken with many, many people because 2-row on the Grand participants tend to become family.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do keep in touch. I've been out hiking with friends, allies who've been on the tour. I've been out cycling with those people. I've been, you know, sitting around a bonfire with them outside of the tour, and those friendships have continued, and those bonds are strong. And it's all of those hardships, and it's all of those struggles, but it's also all of the fun. And I think now there's almost a sense of urgency to keep that flame ignited, even more so going into 2022, because my goodness, I mean, we've had such a revelation of truth in this past few months that going forward, we're all hurting. And to quote Dr. Mike Dockstader, you know, we're not fed till we're all fed. We're not happy till we're all happy. We're not healed till we're all healed. And that really, really strikes a chord in me more than it ever did when I first heard those words from him. And moving forward, we're all in this. It's not going to go away. It's not something we're going to close the textbook and say, oh, I'm not going to read it anymore, because we have to live side by side in this country. And moving forward, what do we want to see? You spoke of youth and how important it is for youth involvement, and I'm glad there's a lot of work being done at the university in which you work, because it's really our youth that have to, number one, I guess, recognize the urgency that's there, but number two, look at problem solving, look at what we can lay out for the future generations.
I mean, a fresh perspective, a youthful perspective.
Well, they certainly have the passion to push things forward. That's what I find about the youth. Sometimes I'm just so astounded because I look at them and I think, what was I doing when I was 17 or 18? Like, I think I wasted my teens, because these youth that are coming in are so evolved and so woke, you know, and the work that they're doing, I was so not there, right? And I think that's probably how most people feel, because it's a different time now, and everybody is born with these gifts, but their gifts are so powerful and so prolific. Like the youth that I'm meeting, I just want to get out of their way, right? It's like, what do you need? Let me get that for you, because I don't know what you're doing, but I know it's important, and just let me make the space for you to do what it is that you need to do, because I don't know what it is, and sometimes they're just so far ahead of me in the way that they think and view the world. I'm astounded, and I'm really hopeful they're going to make the change. They are. Sometimes I give up on us, and I give up on older people, because they're so stuck in these old kind of dysfunctional patterns, and maybe the opportunities for healing or like true healing haven't been presented to them, so they're just like reproducing their own toxicity and pain, and then it's like, oh, we can't talk to them. But if I talk to your grandchildren who you love, and I can affect that child then goes back and says, you know, Poppy, I can't accept the way that you're behaving right now, and you need to change it. And it's with the love in their hearts that is actually going to change the older generations. So I find it's really fruitful, and it's really fulfilling to like just let them do whatever it is they're going to do, and just invite them in and say, okay, tell me. because I don't know half of the time, right? More than half of the time, I never know.
That certainly gives
never
us,
know.
it certainly gives us so much hope
Yeah.
for the future, and you know, we need that. We need that hope. We need that infectious hopefulness that our youth are bringing to us,
Mhm.
and we can't, you know, we can't neglect to listen to them. We need to hear their voices. And yes, our elders are, you know, we've been scarred. You know, we've been through a lot of hurt ourselves. Racial discrimination has been rampant throughout our lives, and there are layers and layers. We become hardened, and perhaps that's part of the journey of an older community member. But that's not to say we can't heal from that. And, you know, allyship, people listening, people wanting to learn more about who we are and about the true history of Canada, as that envelops to Canadians, I think that's all giving us hope.
Yes. I was just going off on a tangent there, thinking about how I originally got involved. It was partially selfish because I really wanted a nice canoe journey, and also I wanted to reconnect with Indigenous people because I had started out one of my first jobs or callings was working with Indigenous people in Manitoba under the auspice of the Presbyterian Church, and it was just like it was 1973, and the school, the residential school in the area had recently closed, and the young people up to age 20 didn't know their own language. From 20 to 40 they knew it, but they were ashamed to speak it. And over 40 it was really their first language, and English was a poor second. So the generation gap there was horrendous, right? And like, language is the key to culture. How do you pass on your culture to someone who doesn't have the key? And when we started learning the language, like I was one of the first in our church to receive the same language training that someone going overseas would receive in order to work in Canada. And so we took a course in how to learn any language, and sat down with Albert Blackbird, who had been a government interpreter, and started learning the language, and that had a ripple effect on the reserve. And yeah, so reconnecting with Indigenous people was important to me. There were I had segued into teaching French for over 30 years and hadn't had much contact with Indigenous people in doing that. And Six Nations was the closest reserve, and so I noticed that the Agawe Canoe Club was opening up and calling for people to come help clean up the vessels and stuff. So I went to make connections, and that's where I met Ellie. And later she invited me to come on the To Wampum Renewal Campaign paddle. So it was selfish reasons, wanting to have a good experience both in canoeing and in connecting. And then when Brooke Johnson said, you know, we really need to bring this to communities along the Grand River, and Ellie and I both said, yes, you know, that's really needed. That's how it all happened.
I think that's the key. Like, you just eloquently expressed exactly the reason that we have to do things like this, right? Because the only way that you're going to combat the hate, and hate is so easy, right?
Yeah.
Like anger and hate and all of it's so easy. It just like something comes at you and tries to disturb your peace and you just chase it. You know,
Yeah.
it's so easy.
Yeah, I would ask my classes sometimes, particularly when there were some issues within the class. I'd ask them, how many people here find it easy to say, I hate you to one of your classmates? Lots of hands go up. How many people here find it easy to say, I love you to one of your classmates? You know, hardly any hands go up.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what we need.
Yeah.
That's what we need as people, and we've got to be able to make those connections.
Yeah. And love is like, it honestly is the only answer. And I feel like our whole prehistory and even our post-contact history is all about finding your path back to that and the power of peace, power, and righteousness, but also love. So I always think about, and this is just something new that I've been thinking about recently. I've written about it a couple of times, but I haven't really delved into it enough to like think about it. But I feel like when they talk about the reason we choose the leaders in the way that we choose them, it's all about emotional IQ or emotional quotient, as opposed to we choose leaders based on the fact that they're married and they have been able to show commitment and responsibility for a long time. All of the characteristics that we use to determine who should be our leaders are the ones who have done their healing work, and they've expressed them in certain ways. And even if you think about our entire Guyana Goa, it's talking about emotional power, right? So when we're talking about peace, power, and righteousness, or skana, gasat stansrla, and gatni guhlio, all of those things are like emotional characteristics. We're talking about how to promote things by being emotionally mature and evolved. So because it's a prescription for peace. The great law of peace is a prescription for peace. It tells us that there's a very clear path that you can travel, and the first thing is, on an individual level, you have to have gatni guhlio. And I always have a difficulty with people translating that as righteousness, because like you can't do that. How can I righteous something? Like it makes the conversation cloudy and confusing. But what I found when I was learning the language is that word gatni guhlio, like if I'm talking about a little baby and I say, oh, Ginny gatni guhlio, what I'm saying is, oh, that little baby is so content. So I was like, okay, contentment. I can function with that word. So if we change that idea over to like the idea of contentment, and then the same thing can happen with the idea of power. When they talk about gasat stansrla, if you don't look at it as the word power, but if you look at it as empowerment or disempowerment, the verb, the actions, the things that you undertake in order to empower or disempower somebody, the actions you undertake to make them content or discontent, right? Those are really powerful teachings, because then you can actually say, oh, the decisions I made today, the thing that I did today, the argument that I had today was disempowering or created discontent. So I'm not actually following the Guyana Let Goa. But if I'm emotionally mature, then I can recognize that those things are there. And so I can do those things. I can activate those types of actions in my own life, and even those thoughts in my own head before they become the actions that I undertake, right? And then, so it's very clear. First, it's gatni guhlio at the individual level, and then the way that you manifest power is to gather with a whole bunch of other people who have done their healing work and are also able to understand and project Gatnigo Rio. That's the only actual power in the world. So we're still talking about love and emotion. People who are like that, who have that compassion and that empathy for other people. And then that is how peace manifests. So things like the Turo journeys, the unity rides and the unity runs, it's all about creating unity and peace. And you're doing that by showing compassion for all of the other people that are there. So if we say peace, power, and righteousness, you have to add on that, and you have to think about those things, right? And how you're going to project it and help the peace manifest. So I try to do that, but still sometimes I look at my neighbor who has, done some very questionable things, and I look at him and I'm like, oops, I don't have enough peace in my heart right now. Somebody else is going to have to affect him because I can't do it, and so I'm just not going to engage there. I'm not going to react to anything there. I'm just going to drive past and live my life.
It's certainly it's a way that we all have to strive for, and it's always going to be an upward journey, because none of us achieves the utmost highest point of love there ever can be. To me, it has to keep growing and growing and growing. It has to be infectious.
Yeah.
And but I really like the way you attach those words to the true meaning of where we need to be. So just a couple more thoughts, Bonnie, in closing. Moving forward now, what are your last thoughts that you would like to share with us on allyship?
Oh man. There's a lot, but I would say I think our allies, there's a lot of ways to do allyship wrong. And if you're coming into this and you haven't done your work in advance, like there's a lot of documentation out there, there's a lot of YouTubes out there, there's a lot of books out there, scholarly articles like ally toolkits and all of those things. People need to read those documents and really think about why they're doing allyship, right? Because there's a lot of opportunities for it to go wrong, for it to be tokenistic, marginalizing, all of those things, still oppressive. There's difficulties in there when people might come into it from like a point of saviorism. But the other thing is, I think people have this idea that it's going to be all hugs and kisses and la-di-da, right? And it just isn't. It just isn't. They're going to come into these spaces and they're going to get vibed, and they're going to get vibed hard by the people, especially if they come in without having done their homework first, right? And the difficulty is then they're stuck in anger and frustration and all of these things because they were coming in with the wrong motivations. So what I always say to people is it's going to be hard. You're going to get your feelings hurt. You're going to get angry and you're going to want to lash out, but like you're going to cry. Like it's going to be hard for you to digest the histories that you haven't yet uncovered. And so you need to take your time with it. And the most important thing is really go away, do your crying, do your yelling and cursing, reflect on that, and come back. The hardest thing is going to be to come back, and especially to come back humbled. Like, humility isn't a huge, well-known process in this culture, right? It's not something that people
value.
Yeah.
Right.
So that humility is going to be the thing. But that also means you're going to be humbled in a big way. right? And so I think just go do your work. Recognize that you've been triggered in all kinds of ways, and that like we don't own trauma response. We're very aware of intergenerational trauma and those conversations, but we don't own trauma response. That everybody has that trauma response. So if you're lucky, you're going to find people who are very loving and evolved to help you deal with that trigger. But you might not. You might have somebody, you're triggered, they're triggered, and there's this huge conflict, and you think, oh, I'm not going back over there. But what I would say is come back, do your work, and come back.
Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Yes.
We've learned a lot from you today. Appreciate your words. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm really happy that you asked me to come and talk to you.
Yeah, we're going.
Yeah. Yeah.